about 50 years, it has been drilled into the minds of the American public by carefully prepared propaganda that the Republican Party contains all the brains and all of the intelligence that's necessary for the conduct of government. Here we are, actually expending $100 million a year in a senseless, useless, fruitless attempt to enforce an unenforceable statute.
In the annals of time, riding social forces as they crest and crash under the shores of history, some would-be heroes stumble but manage to recover their breath. Others are reduced to the flotsam and jetsam of nostalgia. These others are our subjects. They are the vanquished, 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 vanquished.
Welcome to the Vanquished. Anders J. Lee here with Freddie G.
So happy to be here.
And we're joined today by our pal Gastor Almonte.
Equally happy to be here.
Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me. Excited to be here. It's cool. Got to see a little bit of the magic behind the magic. I didn't know that this much work went into it. I'm impressed. Y'all don't see the effort they do. It's crazy. There was a whole shebang. They put together parts of this actual furniture right in front of me. It was beautiful.
Yeah. This was, just one cell of couch, and we unfolded it and doing an entire thing, unrolled it like an accordion.
Real talk.
Yeah, I read more books on this guy than states he won in the presidential election.
That's saying something, yeah. Or maybe not saying much. But
yeah.
We'll get to Al Smith is our topic for today, who is a New Yorker, and I'm two New Yorkers with me here.
Oh, my God, yeah.
We got
Amen.
Brooklyn and Queens.
Amen.
His accent makes our accents look not that New York.
Real
Yeah.
talk.
Yeah, it was extreme.
By the way, fun fact, did you know that his mom is from my neighborhood?
Oh, really?
Real talk. Freddie G's mama Duke is from East New York,
East
Brooklyn.
New York? Okay.
She always says Canarsie, but yeah.
Yeah, yo. Still
She'll be
we out
listening,
there.
though, yeah.
I played baseball over there, so that's my people's.
Oh, my God, yeah.
I love shoehorning in my New York, for which this annoys native New Yorkers endlessly. I'll always point out my grandparents were from the Bronx.
Gang, gang.
Born in 1917 and 18. So my credibility, you have to go a long way back to get it. But my mom, also born in New York, she moved in 1951. But here I am now.
You won the hours, baby.
Yeah, our grandparents grew up in Al Smith's New York. I like to think that my great-grandparents voted for him because the immigrants in New York loved him.
Yes, and that's true. He really was a quintessential ethnic New Yorker. Big step for Irish Americans, very important historical figure for Catholics in the U.S., in New York in general. But yeah, his voice, totally crazy. People have accents, obviously, still in New York, but not like that one. It is so intense. I don't even know how to describe it. How would you guys?
He basically never left New York City until he got elected to the state government. So he just never talked to anyone from out of New York. Radio didn't exist until he was running for president, basically. TV doesn't exist. So he maybe never heard a non-New York accent until he was like 40, 50.
I gotta tell you, I'm desensitized to it. It sounded completely normal to me. I was like, yeah, it's how everybody talks. Nah?
Yeah, well, I guess they had different types of New York accents. His friend/enemy FDR had like a hoity-toity sort of New York thing, and his was very much like the city, Lower East Side, which is where he's from. He was a fishmonger for a while as a kid. There was a little doc I watched that said he would get to work at the Fulton Fish Market 5 a.m. and work till 5 p.m., which sounds pretty miserable, and then go home, pass out, come do the thing the next day.
Yeah, one time he's in the state government, and they're also about like which Ivy League school they went to, and he's like, I went to the Fulton Fish Market. That's where the real shit happens.
Streets of talking. I like it.
Good nautical college.
He's into marine biology. I like it.
You probably learn a thing or two about fish, at least fish bones and how to take them out if you need to. But Robert Caro described him as having gold-capped teeth and a brown derby hat pitched on the side of his head. He was always smoking with the stub of a cigar sticking out. And that is another remarkable thing about him is the teeth are just, he doesn't, back then dental care was less prominent, I guess, but his teeth are just pretty clearly brown, or not what politicians get today. They get them just like fake teeth that are pearly white. He didn't care. He had no bullshit teeth.
You're selling me on the guy. He sounds like a man of the people. You know what I mean? Yeah. He's putting in union hours.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Don't got time to get to the dentist. He's working.
Yeah, he's a pro-union guy. Yeah, he may have gotten people like the Sundays off, like that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. The presidents have had bad teeth and probably bad breath going back to George Washington.
But he was one of the first major party nominee to be Catholic, which was a very big deal at the time, arguably kind of his undoing. And his Catholic people were still kind of freaked out by this religion that had connections to this foreign country, and is popular among all these immigrants coming to the U.S. And the Klan, the KKK, Catholics were part of their enemies list. They didn't like brown people, Jews, or Catholics.
Yeah, basically racism was doing so well they had to be racist. Like they're like, we got the Jews and the non-whites down. We got to go after the Catholics. Yeah, like racism was at its peak.
Huh.
Yeah.
This is like around the era when Woodrow Wilson screamed "Birth of a Nation" in the White House.
Right.
That's when Al Smith is coming up.
The other religions that the presidents have been, aren't they all from other countries too, though?
They're like different branches of Protestantism.
Right? Are those started in America?
No, but they at least go back to England and like the Mayflower.
Gotcha.
That was a weird. I guess it was originally a weird sect of Protestantism that's founded America, but that had been established by the 1920s, and Catholicism was, I guess, not new, but not super native. I guess it was fairly foreign.
Okay.
Just King Henry VIII wanted a son. He needed to get divorced. He took England away from the Catholic Church in the 1500s. And then since then, a lot of people died, and England hated Catholics for a very long time.
But they're here, so why would they be repping the
Well, this country was founded by English people.
But they said, we don't like y'all, and we're going to start our own thing. So why be attached to the thing?
A lot of the people actually didn't like the Church of England because it was too Catholic. That's what the Puritans were.
Oh, so they wanted more.
Yeah.
Okay.
And they were all like, it's popish. They were worried the Pope might run the country if Al Smith is president. There's all kinds of crazy stuff we're going to get to. But yeah, England hating the Pope did go back about 400 years to this time. I'm not saying they hate the Pope today. They got over it. But they didn't get over it till after America bailed them out in World War II and Al Smith was long gone.
Look at that. The growth. I like that. Okay.
Yeah. And there's not another Catholic nominated for a major party until JFK, who won, but it was a pretty big deal that he won as a Catholic and an Irishman as well.
Anyone after?
Biden. That was basically it. I think I want to say Reagan, but no, Reagan was not Catholic, I don't think.
No, yeah, it's just Joe Biden. And both Biden and JFK, their brains stopped working 3 years into the terms.
Amen.
There you
I like
it. Or earlier, depending on what Biden. One misnomer or mischaracterization of Al Smith is that he was an alcoholic because he was openly wet. He was against prohibition. He thought it was stupid. He didn't even try enforcing it in New York. And obviously that opens him up to the accusation of you're just against it so you can get sloshed all the time. But he thought it was a stupid policy. He would have a beer or two now and again. He was a couple of beers kind of guy, but he was not constantly wasted, as his detractors try to say.
And kind of the goal of prohibition was to keep immigrants down, and he's the guy of immigrants.
Yes.
Like the people who owned the beer companies were German. They didn't like that, and they just fought them in World War I, and that helped pass it.
Right.
I love that in like his official bio that you're reading, it still says he only had 1 or 2 beers. Like even they still trying to like finagle the story. I think it's dope.
Yeah, I mean, maybe that's a little gloss that his biographers gave him, and he actually was drunk a lot.
I think he was hammered, and I love it for him.
Well, like the guy at LaGuardia Airport's named after, he's another figure from this time, and he demonstrates how to make beer on like the floor of like some kind of assembly.
Yeah.
Just because New York had like the most booze, even though during Prohibition, but like in the Midwest they had like no booze at that time.
But interestingly, though, there was, at least for a time, Al Smith was like, okay, what about just beer and wine. We just allow beer and wine, and then the other spirits we will ban. But those are more acceptable. I guess lower ABV. But also there's, alcohol, different types of alcohol that goes into like race and class, like different types of people drink different types of drinks. And that's a big part of it. People, in many parts of like places like New York, you get 1 day off a week and you would get drunk, and it was seen as kind of unseemly. And so they would make drinking on Sundays illegal for a while, even before Prohibition. So definitely, a lot of stuff attached to it that's not just the morals of soberness.
Yeah, and the people who made Prohibition, it's the Anti-Saloon League, and they're like kind of like the NRA APAC of their day, and like they're not for compromise, and they hate Al Smith.
Yeah. He was, at the same time as being a machine politician, he was kind of a reformer as well. He's like part of like the progressive sort of machine system. He was a big part of Tammany Hall, which I know you've done a lot of digging.
Yeah, and we've talked about it in some other episodes. And yeah, Tammany Hall is basically like this machine where they get the politicians like from the immigrant neighborhoods, and they'll vote how they're supposed to vote. And at first, Al Smith is like that, and then at one point he's like, I actually want to know what I'm doing, and he reads like crazy, like every bill ever, and he becomes this insane dork. And then he uses that to become a leader. And then, like, there's a lot of good stuff that will benefit immigrants, helping the working conditions, and he spends a lot of time doing that. And he basically does the New Deal before the New Deal in the 20s in New York.
Right. And, that's later he'll be against the New Deal, and his rationale is like, oh, I just wanted one state to do it. I thought it should be like a state thing and not a national thing, which is maybe not that genuine of an explanation. But he gets elected governor 1918. And at this time, all throughout America, very common to have quick terms. You only have 2-year terms for a lot of governors. So he's only in office for until he doesn't get reelected like after his first term.
Yeah, the thing is, in 1920, there's a presidential election, and the Republicans kill the Democrats, so he loses because of the coattails. But then he does come back and he wins 3 more times.
Yeah.
Why did we stop doing the 2-year thing? That's kind of fire, actually. I like that.
I just think it's kind of, not a lot of time to get stuff done before you're gone.
I like the hot seat aspect of it.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, maybe we should bring it back, but it's you have to spend a lot of time campaigning that way. But Minnesota had 2-year terms at that time. Arkansas, up until the 90s, had 2-year terms, and it's a similar thing. Bill Clinton also was unseated after his first 2-year term, and then he came back. Dukakis also had been governor, and then so that's a very common sort of story throughout a lot of these guys. Some of whom win, that they win an executive seat, they get knocked out, but then they make a comeback and get better at doing politics. He spent, as Fred said, his whole life he's been in New York City, and then he finally goes to Albany, and then it's just like a lot of his time is spent in New York, and he has to learn more about New York State, but doesn't necessarily learn a ton about the rest of the U.S., but he does do things like invest in parks, public parks in places like Long Island, upstate, that benefit all New Yorkers, which, at that time we kind of take for granted now that, we have national parks, but that was something they had to actually fight for to implement and buy back from large landowners and give to the people.
Yeah, before Central Park, which is before his time, the only parks were cemeteries. So you'd have to go to hang out at the cemetery. The one problem with his park thing is he does hire Robert Moses as the head of the parks, and he leases Robert Moses on the city. And he's the reason we have, it's a very New York focused episode, but he's the reason we have all those annoying highways and not enough trains and stuff.
Yeah. Bad guy, Robert Moses. But that's, why Robert Caro knows so much about Al Smith, because he had to write the Power Broker. His theme song was, kind of like Eric Adams has New York State of Mind.
Ooh.
The New York.
So hack.
Al Smith had the Sidewalks of New York.
Okay.
Which would play, I guess, in whatever the equivalent of a boombox was back then. They would have that. Maybe he had a band following him around to play the Sidewalks of New York.
There were definitely record players. There's a lot of selling sheet music, and then some with the piano just plays it live for you.
but it's a pretty good song.
So if you throw a party, you had to like hire a pianist to come to the jam?
I would say yes, but ideally one of you knows how to play the piano.
Okay.
If you're like the one guy in town who can play piano and read sheet music, you're in pretty high demand, I would imagine.
Yeah, you're eating well.
Yeah. But he, the lyrics of the song, East Side, West Side, all around the town. The tots sang, Ring Around the Rosie, London Bridge is falling down. Trip the Light Fantastic on the sidewalks of New York, which not a super appealing song for the. You would think he would get a different song when he runs for president, and he's not just trying to win New York, but he sticks with it. He's loyal.
He doesn't totally get why the rest of the country hates New York, and they really did, especially during Prohibition, because we're a bunch of weird boozers or whatever, and they think everyone's like a pimp or a prostitute.
I gotta tell you, I'm seeing myself in this guy more and more.
There's a reason we matched it up, yeah.
Amen. I think the country's in New York. I don't understand why everything is weird when I leave.
Yeah.
I like it. We got good songs centered on us. Everyone else plays them. You should want to be in New York. I'm pro all of this. I don't know.
Yeah, that's a lot of his biographers will say that. That's like he just didn't get it. He didn't, and then that was New Yorkers can be provincial, and they for good reason, because it's a great place. People always complain about New York gets a disproportionate amount of coverage, but that's because there's a disproportionate amount of things going on in New York City. But the Democratic Party in the 1920s. Kind of a mess, much more so than even today.
It was crazy.
You had Wilson, who, in a way, kind of a fluke, because he won in 1912 with a split. Republicans had been really dominant up to that point. And then you have Wilson for a little bit, and he does get reelected. And then we go to Warren G. Harding, who dies in office, and then Silent Cal Coolidge. These are Republicans. And the Democrats are kind of don't really know how to respond or beat the Republican Party at this point.
Yeah, let me defend Calvin Coolidge here, which no one has ever done. He was actually, when you read books from the time, he was very popular. The economy was great. He knew how to get out of trouble. He just delegated everything, and everybody loved Calvin Coolidge. He gets to take over 2 years from Harding. He wins easily in 24, and he could have won in 28. Calvin Coolidge could have been president for over a decade. Everyone loved Coolidge then, and then post 1929 Depression, no one likes him since.
Yeah, he got out at the right time, if you think about it. Maybe he saw which way the winds were blowing economically. And
some people throw parties, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's their gift, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
They don't build the space. They don't, man, he knows what he's doing.
Right. That's what he's remembered for. He's like, he didn't say much, didn't do much other than keep immigrants out. And booze was illegal, but you wouldn't know it hanging out in a town like New York, where everybody's drinking and partying and enjoying the quote-unquote economic prosperity.
He's one of the last guys to win without campaigning. He just never leaves the White House, and they're just like, the economy's too good, the Democrats will implode. He's also upset because his son died towards the beginning of the campaign. So he's just at home being sad about his son, and then he wins a lot of states.
Yeah. But Prohibition has gone into effect in 1921. New York obviously ignores it. There was a strict enforcement law called Mullen-Gage, and just was not possible. Even if they'd wanted to enforce it, it wouldn't have worked. This is a statewide law that Smith repeals in 1923, and he's become...
Let me give you one good tidbit about Mullen-Gage. They made it so if you had a flask, that was the equivalent of an illegal handgun. It was a really strict law, but then there was no way to enforce it. They said something like they'd need 2,000 cops to enforce it, and then they'd need 2,000 more to enforce it on them. So New York loved booze and had so many speakers. It was easier to get booze then than it is now.
I wonder how blatant you'd have to be with the flask to get caught.
If the cop didn't like you, then yeah.
I like this.
Probably search you pretty easily, but cops that time and up until the 40s when my grandfather became one were mostly Irish in New York, and there's some truth to the stereotype that probably explains why enforcement was so difficult in New York.
And Smith is Irish too. Smith is half Irish, half Italian, but he just decides he likes the Irish half better.
Is that? I wonder if that's politically strategic.
It might be. Italians were newer and less powerful.
Yeah, and also different skin tone. We can kind of blend in, Irish people usually. But he's hated by the dry movement, the Brian wing of the Democratic Party, which in theory also progressive on some economic issues, but there's a lot of bad blood there between the Smith wing and the Brian wing.
Yeah, they represent the country. And the big thing with the Brian wing is like they want to help regular people if they're white.
Yeah.
And possibly if they're white and Protestant. So there's a lot of racism there. And he's, and that wing has the Klan. The Klan is a big impact in this time. Yeah, like a huge percent of the people at the Democratic Convention are in the Klan.
That's wild. Jeez.
Yeah. But Al Smith wasn't he was for acceptance of Catholics and white immigrants. He was not exactly, I would assume he's not enlightened on civil rights.
He's like tokenly for, I think, civil rights, but he's not going to fight for it because he needs to win in the Democratic Party, which is like half Klan almost.
Yeah. The Wayne Wheeler of the Anti-Saloon League says of Mullen Gage, it was nothing less than perfidy. It will stir the nation like the shots did on Fort Sumter, Smith's repeal of the Mullen Gage Act. So very provocative move to, in the midst of prohibition, just say, we're not going to do it.
Yeah, and this Wheeler guy, so he got 2/3 of the Congress to change the Constitution to get rid of booze, almost single-handedly. That's how powerful of a guy he was, to convince that much of Congress, who probably a lot of them drank, get rid of booze. And then they don't get rid of prohibition until after he dies. But he beats alcohol forever in his lifetime.
And this tension, it's between the city and the country. New York City is the epicenter of wetness in America. And it all comes to a head, though, in New York, Madison Square Garden, where it just so happens holds the 1924 Democratic Convention. This is one of the craziest DNCs in American history. What happens? Yeah,
it takes them 103 ballots to pick a candidate. That's like insane record. Right now they always do it with the first ballot. The Republicans once in 1880 took 60 ballots, and that was a total shit show. We actually did. We're on a Well, There's Your Problem episode. We talked about that, about the Garfield one. And then the first thing they do is they agree to keep prohibition because they're not ready to get rid of that. They're like, let's vote if we should condemn the Klan. And then half the people are like, oh, actually, we are the Klan, and we're not going to do that. We were just watching a lecture. A historian said if the Klan had more delegates than any individual state, that fails, and that's a bad sign for Smith because he's the anti-Klan candidate.
You know, were they wearing the robes in the convention hall?
I don't think they would. Okay. I don't think they would do that.
All right.
The convention hall was crazy. Oh yeah.
Maybe it was like gangs, like you wear like the do-rag, like you got your flag out your pants, you know what I mean? Just leave the top hanging.
Little mask in your pocket. Yeah.
I like it.
Yeah.
Well, so this is in Madison Square Garden in the summer before air conditioning. So they're insanely hot. They're there for 16 days. They're paying hotel rooms by the night, and they're just like, we need to end this convention. It's real tough.
But there's this guy McAdoo. Who's McAdoo?
Oh yeah, I love McAdoo. Yeah, McAdoo is he was in the Wilson administration. Okay, first of all, he's born during the Civil War. So like Sherman is burning down Georgia, and McAdoo is being born. So like he still has that racist Civil War stuff going on. But then he gets in the Wilson administration. He marries Wilson's daughter. Big coup as far as that. And then he gets to basically start the Federal Reserve. Which is still the system we have now, which is good that the Federal Reserve existed because before that, J.P. Morgan, the richest guy in the world, would have to bail the U.S. government out. So he starts the Federal Reserve. He's very qualified, and he's the candidate of no booze and pro-Klan and the Wilson legacy. And then Smith is going to be the candidate of the cities.
Yeah, and he's governor of New York, which at this time New York has a lot of electoral votes, so that makes you the like a front runner, or at least in the conversation for president, whoever the governor of New York is.
Teddy and Cleveland had both won a couple terms because of that.
Right.
Being governor of New York.
Yeah. But they vote on the Klan denunciation, and after the Klan speech, they celebrate, and they play Marching Through Georgia, which is about Sherman's March, which is like a Union song. The Smith faction is like sort of trying to change the vibes and make it anti-Klan, but that just makes tensions hotter.
Yeah, he wouldn't compromise with the Klan, which is great, but also meant that the convention was just deadlocked.
Yeah. And there were still people there who remembered Sherman's raid and Georgia being burnt to a crisp. McAdoo was an infant at the time in Georgia, so there's fist fights that break out, and the resolution to censure the Klan loses, but just by one vote. And Klansmen said they were afraid of what we might do, and they hit even that, it's obviously the southern base, but at that point there were delegates who were Klan members from Connecticut. Right?
Oh yeah. They were doing well in the north. There's all kinds of there's all kinds of housing segregation and union segregation. There's all stuff like built into the laws to keep non-white people from being equal in the north.
Yeah. FDR, who's a young upstart, makes a speech nominating Al Smith, and he ends on the words "Happy Warrior," which is a sort of a nickname that goes to Al Smith. Hubert Humphrey also has, I think, the same nickname.
Yeah, it's a nickname associated with losing the presidency pretty badly. Yeah.
Happy Warrior. I like that.
Yeah. But the crowd goes nuts for FDR's speech, but is not able to put him over the top. But it is quite close.
It is crazy. Yeah, like multiple bands start playing different songs, and like they do an insane like they just run around the stage. Like everyone just goes crazy for like an hour. And the thing is that they went crazy for McAdoo when he had the speech for him, and the Smith guys are like, we got to go crazy for longer. It's kind of like the standing ovations at Sundance.
Yeah, so they kind of have a celebration off. It's like,
Right.
who's having the biggest response to their name being called, and that's kind of what a convention is at this point. Who can keep cheering the longest, because you have all these ballots, and some of the celebrations end up going out into the street. People are marching with pictures of Al Smith. This is his hometown, and
even Babe Ruth shows up at one point and gives Smith a bat. So it's all
oh wow.
Yeah. There's celebs. Yeah, it's crazy stuff. The big problem structurally is that they have this 2/3 rule where you need 2/3 of the delegate to vote for a candidate, and they have two halves of the party that hate each other, so neither candidate can get 2/3.
Yeah.
Split goes to the Yankees. I like it. Let's go, Babe.
But it does go to the 103rd ballot. How does it take so long?
They just can't break the deadlock. They can't break it. And the way they would eventually do it, and this happened before, is they find a candidate who nobody hates, and they just all agree to go home and nominate the candidate. So they nominate this guy named Davis, who was kind of like a progressive lawyer from, I think, like a New York lawyer. And he's just really, really boring, and no one dislikes him. And the basic vibe is like he's not wet or dry, but he's also incapable of beating Calvin Coolidge.
Yeah, that's someone we'll have to do an episode. He's not even a name that comes up when you hear about presidential losers. Dukakis Mondale, Alf Landon, Al Smith, but John Davis I didn't even know about before we started this podcast.
I had to keep Googling him to remember his name. Yeah, he might be the most obscure guy. I did think he'd be our last episode. We run out of everybody else.
Poor John Davis.
Yeah, it's a very hard name to Google, I would imagine.
Yeah, I wonder how many John Davises there are now. There has to be a fight for that, in terms of who's the most successful John Davis. That John Davis is still high on the list, even though he lost.
Right, he was a major party nominee.
Yeah.
That's true.
And Will Rogers, who's he's an entertainment guy, he says at this point about, he's like, I'm not a member of an organized political party, I'm a Democrat. So they're completely in the toilet.
Yeah, just a total mess. And what is that general election campaign like between Coolidge and Davis, and what kind of role does Al Smith play, if any?
So, yeah, Smith does campaign a little bit for Davis. There's even a thing of people saying that he ran again for governor to help Davis in New York, which doesn't end up working. And, yeah, Coolidge doesn't have to do much, and Davis is just boring, and then they're not going to get a lot of votes. It's the lowest popular vote the Democrats ever got. This is a third-party candidate called Bob Lafayette, who we're going to do. So the Democrats only get 28% of the vote. They do win the solid South. The Klan, basically the Klan people are happy enough. So Davis does a little decently in the Electoral College, but terrible in the popular vote.
Yeah. And he also, we should mention too, Al Smith gives a final speech, I guess, conceding the 1924 nomination, and he's just exhausted. He's totally beat and isn't able to really make a good case for anything.
And he's only talking about New York. That's the problem,
Right.
is he never pivots towards the rest of the country.
Yeah.
Good man.
But yeah, overall, 1924, it is crazy to be putting these same two constituencies together and trying to win the Bryan wing and the Smith wing, even though they have things in common. Just they're totally different. The city and the country, and you spread yourself that thin, you're not really able to appeal to anybody. But that brings us to the next election, 1928. Alfred Smith is seen as kind of a front runner for the nomination. And McAdoo, his big rival for the party, decides not to run. But also you have, on the Republican side, Calvin Coolidge deciding not to run for another term and not end up overseeing the beginning of the Great Depression.
Whoa.
He's lucky, yeah. It works out so well for him.
He cuts out little slips of paper that say, "I will not be running for president in 1928," and just hands them to reporters in lieu of giving a press conference. It's a funny Coolidge move.
Well, you said his kid died?
His kid did die in 24. Yeah, it's still he's less spunkies after that.
Yeah, he's being like a little artsy dude. You know what I mean? He's getting over his emotions. He's doing arts and crafts. I like this guy.
Yeah, that's fair.
This was like his emo era.
Yeah.
You know?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, he is our most emo president. Yeah, back then you didn't have to be much of a public speaker to be president.
Right.
Yeah.
But the guy waiting in the wings is Herbert Hoover. Who's he?
Yeah, so Herbert Hoover, like, now is a joke, but pre-1929, he was like one of the most successful guys in the country. He was a really successful businessman, and like, it is a little bit like the Trump model of like successful businessman. Trump maybe isn't really that, but then becoming a politician. And then, so he's a successful businessman. He's rich is beyond belief, doesn't need money. Then World War I comes, and he's like, I'm going to make sure everyone in Europe gets food, even though there's this war. And then they make him food czar also domestically. So he's just feeding everyone during World War I. Everyone's like, "You're amazing. Do you want to be president?" And he's like, I'll let other people be president. So Harding becomes president. They make Hoover Commerce Secretary, and he does that for 8 years. And he's just like, nothing he does can go wrong. He's the most charmed life. They say if you're sick, you call a doctor. If America's sick, they call Herbert Hoover. He's just beloved, and he's riding on the Coolidge coattails. The economy's great, and Hoover's riding high.
Yeah. And Smith is able to secure the Democratic nomination pretty easily this time. Why is it so different in 1928?
They don't want another deadlock. Smith starts working early on it. He tries in the primaries, which are kind of new at this point. He locks up a lot of delegates. They get to the final. FDR introduces him again. It's great. They get to the first ballot, and like he doesn't have quite enough votes. And like a state like Ohio is like, we'll just switch to Smith, put it over the top. America loves Smith. It's just it's the best moment of his life, and he wins on the first ballot, and he's going to get to his chance.
America loves. Is that ALS? Like as the initials of his slogan?
Yeah.
That's
That
pretty
is
shitty.
weird. Yeah.
Yeah, it sucks.
Maybe before it meant the other thing.
Yeah, Lou Gehrig didn't even have it at this point. Yeah.
Okay, never mind.
But Catholicism quickly becomes a big issue. There's a conclave of ministers from Atlanta who say, "You cannot nail us to a Roman cross and submerge us in a sea of rum," which is a pretty effective talking point against him. He's accused, like Kennedy ultimately is, of reporting to the Pope, and they warn the American people that the Pope's going to be in charge. The president's going to have to, get his sign off on whatever he wants to do. And it's a pretty mainstream sentiment that this is going to happen. But Smith is not that loyal of a Catholic.
Yeah, he doesn't know. He's not the most religious of guys. He doesn't totally understand what they're even talking about, like all these like weird Catholic rules they're bringing up. Like he's not thinking back to the Middle Ages when the Pope had to approve every marriage and divorce for the royal family. Like he doesn't know about that stuff. He's just living in New York and a more pragmatic guy.
Yeah.
No, I'm just blown away by that aspect of it. That if you are what's the Church of England, Protestant?
Yeah, it's Protestant, yeah.
So if you're an American Protestant, you wait for the King of England to make decisions?
They sort of separated from the King of England, and they had their own. Protestants is a lot more divided. Like they don't have a hierarchy the same way.
Okay.
But but England did have it where the king was the head of the church.
So in their head, every Catholic person they've met is like, yo, I can't do this. I got to wait till the Pope gets back to me. I'm reading the email. Like,
Yeah. And I think in like Oklahoma, they don't have Catholic people.
At all.
So they might not have met Catholic people. They probably think like Jews have horns, like all kinds of crazy.
Yeah, like I'm just blown away by the idea that like they thought like, nah, but he's gonna wait for the Pope for answers. Like nobody does that. Nobody waits for the head of anything.
A good illustration of all this stuff is like, and this is 50 years later, but Archie Bunker on the show All in the Family still has all these prejudices.
Okay.
So he's a good representation of that. Like he says,
Is he Catholic in the show?
I think he's Protestant and he doesn't like Irish people. No, he's anti. Yeah, they even talk about his neighbor has to tell him like she thinks the Pope's infallible for some things but not others. So yeah, Archie Bunker is a great illustration of all this stuff. And then you could also say Archie Bunker is Donald Trump, who is now president.
Look at that historical figure, Archie Bunker. I like that.
I always figured he was Irish, but I guess not.
He would be very offended by that.
But yeah, people genuinely believed at that point, and they were warned that Al Smith would destroy public schools and civil marriages would no longer be recognized because if we have a Catholic president. And one of his detractors also said that Lincoln, Garfield, and McKinley, the three assassinated presidents at this point, were all killed by Romanists. So Catholics have a bad name. I don't know if Booth was a...
Do they have a bad name or a bad ass name? You know what I mean? Come on, man.
Booth was basically a Klansman before the Klan existed. I don't know which religion he was, but he was not...
I don't think he was Catholic.
He was
that much.
Yeah, he was very... Yeah, the idea of black people voting made him like, I'm going to kill the president, and that's never been done before.
Yeah.
Yo, that's wild.
There was one quote-unquote source that reported that apparently there had been plans drawn up so that the minute the election was over, the president-elect could send a battleship to Rome to bring the Pope to the United States.
The original Pope mobile.
Oh, yeah.
Hell yeah. Bulletproof boats, yo. Let's go.
And then, yeah, the when Al Smith ends up losing, there's a New York intellectual who sends him a telegram that says "unpack" as a joke. But I'm sure somebody found out about that and was like, see what could have happened. Yeah, they're worried about the Pope running the post office and just taking over the military. Just a lot of crazy theories about what would happen under a Catholic.
I mean, to be clear, like, Catholic people don't want him to do that. I would assume either, right? Like, the Pope would be shitty at all of those jobs.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think they were pushing that agenda. That's pretty funny. I like that.
Yeah, I mean, if the military is run by the Pope, he'd just pray to people. And post office.
The post office
you can
sounds
just
terrible.
communicate through prayer, so he'd be like, yeah, you don't need to send a letter.
These stamps. Come on,
Oh,
man.
yeah.
You seen my hat?
Yeah. But the Klan, which included many Democrats, so it's weird. When Smith gets nominated, they just burn all these crosses across the country. And when he goes to Kansas, Smith is greeted in silence. Oklahoma Klansmen burn crosses along the route of his campaign trail. And eventually the Klan is sort of declining, though, for a moment there. And
yeah, they're losing a little bit of steam. They had the revival after the movie. The movie's now 10 years old.
Birth of a Nation.
Yeah, exactly. And then, the economy's good. People are a little less angry. And the Klan's like, oh, well, we got this Catholic now. We can drum things back up. And people are saying all kinds of terrible things about Catholic. Bob Jones, who founded Bob Jones University, which I believe still exists, said, I'd rather see an N-word in the White House than have Al Smith be president.
I think Obama pointed that out as an endorsement when he was running for president. Endorsed by Bob Jones. Smith does try to address it. He has an ad, a one-page advertisement that runs in several cities, has a Tomb of the Unknown Soldier, and asks the question, who asked his religion? So people fought and died for our country from all sorts of faiths and backgrounds, and that shouldn't matter, he's trying to say, which, in theory, that's part of what America's all about. Freedom of religion is what we profess to believe here.
Yeah, and Smith loves America. He's very patriotic. He's very happy to be in America.
Yeah. And he gives a speech in Oklahoma City, says that everything that has actually happened to me during my long public career leads me to know that no such thing as that is true, what people are saying. I have taken an oath of office in the state 19 times. Each time I swore to defend and maintain the Constitution. I've never known any conflict between my official duties and my religious belief. And this
Deep cut, but Tulsi Gabbard, who we did recently, uses this as a defense on why she's not loyal to Russia at some point.
Ah, interesting. She pulls out Al Smith. That is a very Tulsi move. Very just take an obscure political figure. But yeah, this ends up. His daughter says this is the deepest shadow in Al Smith's life, and it's not by the 60s, by 1960 anyway. There's enough Catholics in America that kind of actually helps Kennedy get the nomination and turns people out to vote. But I guess it's just such a distinct minority at this time, and they're just so vilified and hated that it's just purely a negative.
Yeah, and he's kind of Catholic FDR Kennedy, where he's like from a rich family and like there are betters.
Right.
And Smith is like from the 4th Ward of the Lower East Side. Yeah, he's a working class guy. Yeah.
Yeah.
He's a fishmonger, as we said.
But as with many, if not most elections, the main issue is the economy, which at this point, despite people toiling away in sweatshops and labor unionists being murdered, the economy is seen as very good. It's a time of prosperity. Coolidge is reported to have done a good job. Wall Street is doing pretty well. And so people have to wonder why would we change? And that's the sort of motto that Hoover supporters use. Why change? A chicken in every pot is one of the phrases that. What is that? What's the full phrase? A chicken in every pot. A car in every
garage. Yeah, we all just have enough stuff. Yeah, things are good. Yeah, it's kind of the way the economy was maybe in 2019. Yeah, it's just like everyone's got enough of everything. And yeah, cars are still new at that point. And yeah, Henry Ford had made them affordable to everybody.
Yeah, but you were telling me though that phrase was not actually said by Hoover. It was his supporters who were rich guys.
Yeah, rich businessmen paid for that. Yeah.
Yeah. And local Republican groups ran that ad in 1928, and they're describing in the ad, when ads could actually go into detail, they said that the Coolidge administration had reduced hours and increased earning capacity, silenced discontent, put the proverbial chicken in every pot, car in every backyard to boot, and they said a vote for Hoover and any other Republican candidate is a vote for continued prosperity. But so Smith has to kind of combat this and say, actually, we're not doing well. And he ridicules the administration's Pollyanna-ish interpretation of their own wage statistics. And he says that while the Republicans claim that everybody owns an automobile, everybody lives on chicken dinners, Bureau of Labor Statistics had declared $2,000, the minimum livable annual income for a family of 5, which is crazy by today's standards, while calculating that the average wage for a manufacturing worker was $12.80 a year. This is from the book Revolution in 1928. So that's a pretty big discrepancy there. You're $720 short of a living wage, just the bare minimum to raise a family. And this
is the trouble Biden got in, where he's like saying the economy's great, and then people are like, we can't afford stuff, and big problem. And the problem is that the big business is not going to support Smith because Hoover is a businessman. He's pro-business. Smith has done like progressive stuff and regulated business. He even tried to like start a power company or a power authority or something like that the state owns. So like they kind of think of Smith as a little too communist, even though he's not at all.
How expensive are chickens at this time?
That's a good question. I mean, you probably have to take out a loan to get them in some places. Cheaper than today, but that's like what you eat to feed a full family. You get one chicken, I guess, and that's what people are satisfied with in many cases. Just as long as we got our chicken, we don't have to rock the boat. But there's a deeper structural problem at play that Smith is trying to point to, but the American people are just like, we're getting by. It's good enough. And, a big obstacle people run into in politics, especially in America, is like people just don't think things can get better, so why try? Because you could end up making it worse. He really does not learn too much, even though there's rural parts of New York State, doesn't learn too much about farm policy, and does not, again, really get why people have any issue with New York or don't want to move here. And it's an interesting contrast with now, 100 years later, Donald Trump, who's from New York, but is able to appeal to the rest of the country. It's ironically everywhere else but New York City.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it is. These are the two most New York politicians. But yeah, Trump is like, I'm from New York and they suck. And then Smith is like, I'm from New York and it's great. Why don't you love us? I did. Yeah. Also, farmers are actually having a recession in the 20s. So they actually do need help. And we talked in the Henry Wallace episode about how him and his dad broke away from the Republican Party and moved more towards independent and then towards the Democrats. But Smith is not able to take up this energy at all. And he's even but yeah, people in cities are doing great. Even regular people are investing in the stock market. And they think it's going to go up forever, and that's not good for winning as a challenger.
Yeah. And similar theme to today, Smith, even though he does have a fairly progressive background, he's as governor, making water a public resource, utilities, really investing in progressive ideas, which we're somewhat radical at this point, having universal sort of rights to nature and to resources. He's running sort of a moderate campaign on economic issues, right?
Yeah, so he hires a rich businessman who's Catholic, too, not a great idea, from New York to run his campaign. And this guy had invented the idea of buying a car on credit. And then later on, he invents a thing where you could buy stock on margin without all the money. And it's going to eventually cause the stock market crash.
What does that mean for us who are those?
Oh, stock on margin is like you put up $10 to buy $100 worth of stock. And then if it goes up, you're fine. But if it doesn't go up, you owe a bunch of money. You can lose more than you put up.
Wow. Yeah, it's interesting. It's New York. A lot of liberal to left people living here, but also it's the heart of capitalism in Wall Street. So.
Sounds like a man of faith. I like it. Believes in this thing and it'll exist later.
Yeah. This guy is easy to demonize, even though he's on the same side as Hoover's people. He's Catholic and a millionaire, so you can paint Al Smith as an agent not just of Rome but also of Wall Street.
And those are things that we have now. Like the ideas were good; they just needed structure, hard caps.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, the thing is, Wall Street is really unregulated at this time.
Yeah.
What's going on in the 20s is JFK's dad, Joe Kennedy, is doing all the dirty tricks. And then in the 30s, they make him head of the SEC, and he cracks down on everyone for doing them. But every dirty trick you could think of is legal at this point.
Yeah.
I don't think you have any regulations of Wall Street, right?
Not that I know of, yeah.
Were after the crash.
So this dude invented buying stocks on margin and car loans?
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Nice.
Yeah. I'm pro this guy.
Yeah, you look at it, maybe. But yeah, his Smith's advisors, they want to prove that he's not a radical and he just wants a sound business climate. And they think, the economy's doing so well that we'll just continue this. But then why wouldn't we just vote for the other people who are in charge right at this point?
Yeah, absolutely. And then also, since they have similar positions, it just becomes about stupid things like who's Catholic.
Yeah. It undercuts, according to the book, The Empire Statesman, this undercuts Al's standing with his most loyal and traditional audience, reformers and progressives. And there's an editorial in The Nation that says Mr. Hoover stands in this contest for the old order, but when they look at Al's record, they can't see as much to support as they would have liked, which causes them considerable teeth gnashing. You just had, as you mentioned, La Follette, who had ran fairly for a third party, did pretty well in 1924. calling for progressive economics. And Smith is loath to really pick that up in 1928.
Yeah, it's disappointing. He could have really. You got to stand for something when you're running, and he doesn't. And it's just not. He doesn't give people a reason to vote for him. He's not even going to win his home state.
And one historian says the two parties' platforms were as nearly identical as they could be without a mimeograph. Walter Lippmann even complains that he can see no difference between the two parties' platforms except that the Republican took longer to read. But
some things never change.
Yeah. But this becomes an issue at the Democratic Convention. What do we do about prohibition? How do they square that circle in 1928? Because it's still a law of the land.
Smith is against it, but they're kind of like in the platform. They're like, well, we'll change it a little bit. We'll let you drink beer and wine, that kind of thing, or we won't enforce it as much. They're not ready to get rid of it yet. It's not once the Great Depression happens, then people are ready to get rid of it. It's also really hard to do another constitutional amendment.
Yeah.
They didn't think they'd be able to, but when they finally do, it's pretty easy because everyone's like, we're depressed, please give us booze.
Right. But this puts him in a classic Democratic position where he's both for and against it. He's running as a modificationist. Both parties pledged to uphold the law by enforcing it, which, you could tell Smith doesn't really believe in it, but he's sort of trying to have it both ways.
He's also like, he's got the shoe into the nomination. He's like, let me not screw this up like it got screwed up in 24.
Yeah. So his greatest achievement was his courage. People say that he never backed away from a fight, which, maybe sometimes you should back away from certain fights, but he does.
That's such a blind date setup thing. What's his best attribute? Courage. This unquantifiable thing, that's what is best about him.
Yeah. But this is one campaign where radio is a big aspect of it. They don't have TV yet. But how does radio help or not help the Smith campaign?
You can only hear his voice, and his voice is described as being a terminal New Yorker. So you're hearing this weird guy over the radio, and maybe people had never even heard a New York accent before, and it's just like, who is this guy? I'm not voting for him. Also, like, the radio microphones were really bad, and you had to like just talk into it, real simple on it. Hoover's great at this. Smith is like gesticulating wildly, and like words can get missed and stuff like that. And TV is coming, and on TV, Smith would be a lot better, but it doesn't come in time for him.
Yeah. And one of the issues he's talking about, immigration. They've restricted it significantly in the early 20s, and Al Smith doesn't get it. Why don't, that's what America's supposed to be about. He's the child of immigrants. And he says to a crowd in St. Paul, my hometown, any man who comes to this country, raises a family, educates them in our public schools, and by his labors and toil helps them to open the channels of trade and commerce, obeys our laws, is just as good a citizen of this country as the man or group or men who can point to a long and unbroken line of New England ancestry. So championing immigration as an American ideal, but not a very popular position at this time, unfortunately.
He does win Massachusetts, so maybe that line worked.
Yeah.
They're like, okay, you put us in our place.
Right.
Respect.
Ironically, like where the Pilgrims landed, but by the 1920s, a lot of immigrants still there. Well, I guess Pilgrims were immigrants ultimately.
But a lot of more recent immigrants. Yeah,
Yeah.
you're right. Yeah, but that's where the Kennedys are from. Yeah, a lot of Irish people in Massachusetts.
Yeah. His vice presidential pick, Joseph Taylor Robinson. Who is he?
Yeah, so he's not super interesting. He is a draw. He's from the South, balanced the ticket out. He'd been a senator and governor of Arkansas. Certainly not a very exciting state yet. He could have picked somebody from a bigger state. But the only good thing about Joseph Robinson is he did get into a golf fight. Yeah, that's right. They're at the Chevy Chase Country Club, which I guess Chevy Chase, the movie star, not named himself after this place or whatever. This is before Chevy Chase was born. But they're golfing, and a fellow golfer asked to move ahead of the senator's foursome. And Robinson is like, I'm not giving you that courtesy. And the guy's like, well, I'm a local surgeon. You better. And then Robinson punches him. So he is known as the pugilist senator after that. So he is a bit of a fighter. This is before the campaign, but I'm sure Smith liked that he was picking a guy who was at least a little bit tough.
Yeah.
I like this.
And the smear we talked about earlier continues that he's a drunkard. He's always hammered and wasted, and his son insists to the press that his father had never had more than 2 drinks in any given evening.
That's probably before the kid went to bed. That's a little low.
Yeah.
2 drinks.
I'm
Yeah.
telling you.
Yeah, I'm sure he's like usually 2 drinks, sometimes 3 or 4 or 5 or 6.
Yeah, he's very good in person, Smith. So he's not like getting drunk and making a fool of himself. Yeah, like he's loyal to his wife. He's good with people, the politics behind the scenes and all that. So he knows how to compose himself.
It's good when drinking brings out the best in you. I like this.
But in 1928, November election night, people gather in Times Square to celebrate what they think. Maybe their guy is going to go to the White House and all.
Yeah, they block it off like it's New Year's Eve, and they have like a way of indicating.
Yeah, which is, there's no TV.
Yeah,
so,
you need something.
Yeah, they just have different mechanisms to keep the public abreast of the latest developments, as the Empire Statesman says. In the center of New York, the Times Tower rigged up an astoundingly complicated set of signals to let people know what was happening. If the flagpole in front flashed a circle of white lights, meant that Smith was leading. If the lights glowed red, however, Hoover was surging ahead, and next to this was a searchlight, which, if it swung in a semicircle to the north, meant that Smith had finally clinched it. But if the semicircle went south, then Hoover was winning.
The game of telephone that people played to keep all that shit straight is insane.
Yeah.
Like, I know they got that wrong by the time like you heard about it. Like, nah, the flag got to swing to the left.
Right.
Fritz, I mean, you know, I got confused.
Yeah, and everyone's probably really drunk.
Yeah.
Just people spreading misinformation. Well, no, actually, if it goes up, then the Pope is now in charge of the country.
Yeah.
Dictatorship.
You didn't hear that? No? I do like the idea of renting that out for like a baby shower today, like a gender reveal.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
Right? Yeah, it's an option.
That'd be cute. Yeah.
Look at that.
But yeah, no TV, so they gotta keep track of it somehow. But was Smith. Did anyone expect him to win going into this?
I don't know if they had polls at this point, and I think people in New York probably loved him and were a little into it. So I think because they set this all up, they probably thought so. Now, I don't know when the polls closed back then in New York, but they close at 9 o'clock now, and by 9:30 he had lost. So this Times Square thing doesn't last very long.
Yeah, that's rough. But they still counting. They're like, nah, don't even bother.
Yeah.
It's over.
But he does do quite well in urban areas. He carries the 12 largest cities, and that becomes a sort
He
of.
got slaughtered.
Yeah. Just show Gastor the electoral map, and only the South is blue, basically.
Yo.
Yeah.
That's rough.
Yeah, but the popular vote though was a lot closer. He gets into the 40s, right?
Yeah, he gets 40% of the popular vote, which is a lot better. The other guy had gotten 12%. And he gets the most votes ever because women can vote, which they weren't able to a couple elections ago. So he gets a lot of votes, but in cities, and they don't win the states. So he doesn't win New York State, for instance, but I'm sure he does amazingly in New York City.
Yeah, but that must have been kind of an upset, not him not winning New York, because he's the governor here, but you have so many people in the upstate who are just resentful of Smith, and so they come out and vote for Hoover. He wins Arkansas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, South Carolina, Massachusetts, and Rhode Island.
I mean, I got coworkers I like that. I was like, yo, you shouldn't get promoted. You know, like you're at your peak. You know what I mean? You've reached your level.
Yeah, that's fair. But yeah, there were probably a lot of people like that who were like, yeah, I voted for him for governor, but
President. That's crazy. Yeah.
can't do that. I mean, because that would bring more attention to like that he becomes now the faith of Catholicism. So
Yeah.
everything he does comes back to bite you if you're a Catholic in New York.
So there are Confederate states that have never voted for a Republican since Lincoln.
Yeah.
And but Hoover still wins them, and that's like Texas, Florida, and the Carolinas of Virginia. So yeah, he loses some states. That's pretty embarrassing that he lost.
But it is still kind of impressive. It's just a weird irony to me that he would win like Mississippi, Georgia. Louisiana has a lot of Catholics, so that makes sense. But like these are places where the Klan is predominant and they've just been demonizing Al Smith, but the people end up voting for him just, I guess, because he's a Democrat.
Yeah, I think it's a habit of like, oh, we vote Democrat.
Yeah.
The people the Klan type people, they're protesting him. And like the Democratic Party infrastructure in a lot of states is Klan backed, and they're not doing much to help Smith. They're just kind of sitting it out.
Right. But he does, though, have there is like a lot of urban people, obviously, who vote for him. And the Republicans are able to, like you said, appeal to new southern states. But this becomes the cities where he wins. That becomes part of the New Deal coalition that Roosevelt builds on. And then for really the rest of the 20th century, cities are heavily Democratic, and that has a lot to do with the 1928 election.
Yeah, and that's still the divide today. Yeah, the Democrats win the next 5 consecutive presidential elections. And most of them aren't even that close. Maybe the last one is close. But yeah, FDR is going to win 4 in a row.
Yeah. Traditionally, people say it was the economy that did Smith in, but not Catholicism. But the Empire Statesman, that biography, has some evidence to refute this. How do we know Catholicism played such a role?
Like, if you kind of control for all the variables, the Catholicism kind of stands out. And also just a lot of anecdotes about it. A lot of people just saying that it was... Back then, people were all saying, oh, yeah, it's the Catholic thing. People don't like Catholics. And especially losing states that the Democrats never won. Now, I don't think... if he was Protestant, I don't think he would have won, because I think the economy was enough to put Hoover over the top. But he loses so badly in the Electoral College, that's probably the Catholic thing.
Yeah. So we all like to think about what would have it taken for the person to win. I guess not be Catholic and stop the economy to be bad, and that's what happened. You had a guy from New York who wasn't Catholic, and the economy was in the tank, who won 4 years later by a landslide. But let's say Al Smith had won. What would have happened? What kind of president would he have been like? And would he have been similar to Roosevelt? Would he have done the New Deal?
Gastor, do you have an opinion?
I think he does the same deal. I think that he is the original ghostwriter. I think he wrote it first. I think FDR bit him. And all he's been doing is just trying to get credit back. You know what I mean? He's like Daz Dillinger to Dr. Dre. Like, I made all those beats, you know? So, yeah, he's just mad. Somebody took his credit.
Yeah, that's so nice. I really hope he would have been that. The weird thing is that his campaign manager was like this Wall Street guy, and I feel like that might have really hurt him. That he's just seen as in bed with Wall Street, and everyone just starts to hate him, and he becomes Herbert Hoover. And later on in his career, he sort of jumps to the Hoover side once FDR gets all the credit, which is weird.
Yeah, I think that scarred him. He just wants, and on top of that, the dude like just wanted to win once. This dude keeps winning. He stole his credit and then stays in office longer than anyone.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like that had to scar him. The idea that I had got you elected and kept you in office forever. You know what I mean? You just bit my style and stayed there for the longest.
No, and you're right. Yeah, FDR gets to be governor because Smith can't run for governor or president. And then he just, it is really sad. Yeah, and he gets really bitter.
Yeah, that is interesting. I mean, would he have done the same stuff? I think a lot of it is personal. Like, he clearly has this resentment of FDR. He tries to make it an ideological thing and be like, oh, I wouldn't have done that nationwide. I just wanted to do it in New York. But we can tell you just are mad about FDR getting the credit and being of the most years as president of anyone in the country. But
it's like whoever taught like improv at UCB, and then like your student becomes an SNL cast member.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Like that dude, he came up under me. You know.
Right. Yeah.
And there is the thing of Smith becomes the president of the Empire State Building project.
Yeah.
And that just makes him with business focus, and he just loses his progressive bona fides for a while.
So if of the 3 things, which of these you think would have gotten him closest to winning? Not being Catholic, running during the time of television, right? Or changing his accent.
I think not being Catholic. In 1928, it seemed like that was a pretty tough one.
Yeah, I would say so. I think the economy crashing a year earlier is the thing that would make him win.
Yeah. If that had happened in 1928, that's a good, like October 1928, maybe enough people are like, fuck it, I'll go with a Catholic. Let's do it. But then he gets in there, and he's just run on this fairly moderate program. Would he have had the cojones to do what FDR did? I'm not so sure. I think maybe we end up just kind of creeping further into the Depression. But
yeah, and FDR
again,
used. Oh, sorry.
Then again, there were people like Francis Perkins, who winds up in the Roosevelt administration, Secretary of Labor, who had worked for Smith. So maybe he does have some progressives, and it is definitely better than Hoover. I think we can say that much.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. The big problem is his communication wouldn't have been great. He wasn't as good at radio. FDR was really good at the radio and just an amazing communicator. And Smith wouldn't have had that, so it would have been a little more of an uphill battle.
Yep. All right. Well, Al Smith, fascinating figure who we're going to dive into more on the Patreon half, a little bit on his bio, some more about the tumult between him and FDR. But Gastor, thank you so much for joining us. Where can people find you and your work?
Yeah, you can find me on all social medias at Gastor Almonte.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of The Vanquished. If you want the full thing, because there is more, please go to patreon.com/thevanquished, where you can get the rest of this episode as well as our full episode catalog. You can support our work as well as annoy us in the comments.